we're going to have a look at how Instana and DBmarlin can work alongside each other to get to the root cause of database problems. So in this example, I'm starting from Instana. I'm looking at an application here called Bike Store. And you can see over here that there was a latency spike during this period over here. And underneath that, we can see the orange line shows that it was actually database time which increased, causing that latency spike. So from here, if we want to see the databases that this application is dependent on, we can use the dependencies chart. And we can see here there's actually 3 different databases. But in this case, it's this orders DB, which is a MySQL database, which shows that spike there in latency. So from here, if I click into the dashboard now for this database service, we can see we're looking at the orders DB MySQL service. And during that period there, that 5-minute period, we saw a complete drop in calls per minute coming through the application service. And we saw this big spike over here in latency, like we saw at the application level. So looking at our top statements now, you can see we've got one here which has latency way higher than all the others in this list. So this looks likely to be the cause of our problem here. So clicking into that statement now, we now get into the analytics part of Instana, which shows all these application traces containing that SQL statement. And if we sort by latency now, we can see there are some faster ones taking 2 milliseconds. And if I sort again in descending order, we can see some much slower ones taking up to 296 seconds in this case. So if I pick on the slowest one here at the top of the list, I can see this particular request took almost 5 minutes. And it was dominated by this orange bar here, which is the database call that we're interested in. So over on the right-hand side now, you've got the SQL text, and you can also see the connection that this request went to. It was a MySQL database. You can see the instance, and we can see that it was the orders DB database within that instance. So this is as far as you can get with Instana. So to get to the root cause now, what we're going to do is hop over into DBmarlin and see how we can get to the root cause here. So this is our top-level dashboard now within DBmarlin. I'm going to click into this MySQL instance because I know that's the same one that we were just looking at in Instana. And now what I can see is that we had this 5-minute window where we had this spike in database time. So the green is total amount of time spent processing SQL queries, and that spike for this 5-minute period here. So what I would do from here is first of all, I would look at the statements, and I can see that the purple shown here, which is also shown in the ring chart below and the top of the list over here, that is the same statement that we saw from the Instana point of view. That's the thing that has really slowed down during this time period. I would then also have a look at the wait events, and you can see that this big 5-minute spike is dominated by this dark red color, which corresponds to this ring chart here, which is looking at the wait events. In this case, it's waiting for table metadata lock, which is a MySQL wait event, indicates that there's some locking going on here, which is a common thing with databases. So even though this problem only lasted for 5 minutes, we can see there looking at the time, we've got 2 hours and 13 minutes of lock time because lots of sessions are all queued up waiting for this lock to be released. And so down here we see our statement, and we see that spends pretty much all of its time waiting on that metadata lock. And just below it, we see here the thing that's actually locking the table. Now, if we jump back to the top chart, we've got some events shown on the timeline here. So the first one here is a custom event, and then the second ones are alerts. So jumping over to the events tab, we can see what those were. So the first one was actually a custom event of type code release, and this was triggered by a Jenkins job deploying a particular build of the application. We can actually click in here. That takes us then through into Jenkins, where we can then sign in and have a look at that particular build and look at what that was doing. But in this case, that looks to be coinciding with the start of our incident here. And then we had some alerts that were triggered. So the wait time crossed the threshold and the alert started. And then 5 minutes later, wait time came back below our threshold and that alert was then cleared. So now you've got the full picture of what's happened here. It looks like a deployment that caused a lock within MySQL. It then triggered an alert. It caused this particular statement to run slow. And then that's what caused our application to slow down. So coming from Instana into DBmarlin, that's the way you can do it. Going back in the other direction, we actually have an integrations, which you can set up here if you just provide your Instana API key. So clicking on databases now, we can see that we've actually got 3 different databases, and the top one here is the orders DB, accounting for 94% of all our database activity. But over here, we've got an Instana button, And if you click on the button, what that's going to do now is to look for a matching service called OrdersDB of type MySQL and try and find that within Instana. So clicking there now, it's doing the search for that service. And in a second, you'll see we're now back to where we were looking at the OrdersDB service. You've got the dropping number of requests here and the spiking latency here. So that's how you can go back in the other direction. So I hope that's useful. And if you want to try this out, if you're already a customer of Instana, we have a special offer running at the moment. If you head to this URL shown on the screen now, you can get one free copy of DBmarlin to monitor any database of your choice.